tiefling child stands accused in the sacred pool. Kagha does not shout. She does not threaten. She speaks calmly, precisely, as a viper coils at her feet. If you've played Baldur's Gate 3, you know this moment. Your hands hovering over the dialogue wheel. You feel the tension, not because violence is happening, but because it might. This is not just a dramatic scene, this is a leadership moment. Fear does not always sound like panic. Sometimes fear sounds like policy. Most players leave the Emerald Grove thinking Kagha is cruel, but Kagha is more useful than a villain. Kagha is what fear looks like when it gets authority. She is what happens when a leader fails a charisma check they never even attempted to roll. Fear narrows a leader's imagination. It hardens their language. It turns people into problems and tempts leaders to call control responsibility. If you've ever led a party, a team, a family, or even just a difficult conversation, this is a warning that you want early. Halsin is missing. The goblins are circling. The Rite of Thorns is already underway. The druids believe that they are running out of time. And when leaders inherit a crisis, their first instinct is almost always the same: regain control. This is the first warning light. Control feels like courage when you're afraid. But confusing the two is how leaders start hurting people while calling it protection. Arabella did steal the idol of Sylvanas, but not because she's evil, not even because she's reckless, but because she's a child trying to stop a ritual that will push her family into danger. Kagha never asks why, and that's the tell. Baldur's Gate 3 is full of dialogue checks: persuasion, insight, deception, intimidation. And Kagha fails the most important one before the dice even roll. Fear makes leaders stop asking questions. It skips straight to punishment because punishment feels like certainty. So here's the first takeaway, simple enough to use today. Before you discipline, before you enforce, before you make the hard call, ask yourself this question out loud. What do I not understand yet? In the Grove, that question could have changed everything. Instead, Kagha treats a terrified child like a contaminant, and everyone in the room feels it. If you want to spot fear-driven leadership in real life, listen for the moment that empathy completely vanishes. The conversation stops being a dialogue tree. There are no more options, only consequences. That's when a leader stops leading and starts prosecuting. After Arabella, Kagha's logic sharpens. Outsiders are the problem. The grove must be protected. The ritual must be completed. Fear rarely announces itself as fear. It disguises itself as duty, as responsibility, as doing what others are too weak to do. And here's a second takeaway. If you hear yourself saying, "I have no choice," assume that you are missing choices. Baldur's Gate 3 almost never removes your options. It just hides them behind risk, behind social checks, behind outcomes you're afraid to face. Kagha doesn't lack options, she lacks the nerve to roll the die. So pause long enough to look for the third option, adventurer. If you follow the investigation into Kagha, you will find a hidden letter, a doctrine, and a connection to the Shadow Druid she never disclosed. This is where Kagha's fear stops being private and becomes organized. She doesn't just panic, she gets recruited. The Shadow Druids tell her exactly what fear wants to hear: that outsiders are corrupting, compassion weakens, isolation purifies, and force clarifies. And notice what this gives her. It makes Kagha feel righteous, it makes her feel strong, it makes her feel certain. And most importantly, it tells her she's not alone anymore. Fear loves an echo that sounds like wisdom. And so here's the third takeaway. Don't ask who agrees with me, ask who is allowed to challenge me. If the only voices around you flatter your instincts, you don't have counsel. You have confirmation bias and ceremonial robes. The Rite of Thorns isn't just a spell. It's what happens when fear becomes a policy, a literal wall built from a leader's need to control outcomes. And look at what it actually accomplishes. The goblins still exist. The absolute is still spreading, and the world is still very dangerous. The danger is just relocated onto the people with the least power. That's the pattern. Fear-driven leadership rarely solves the threat. It protects the system by sacrificing vulnerable people. And so here's your fourth takeaway. Before you finalize a major decision, finish this sentence. The people who will pay the cost of my choice are. In this case, it was the tieflings. If you can't name them, you are not ready to decide. If you can name them, you must ask whether you're protecting people or just protecting your comfort. This is the trade fear offers leaders. Safety now, integrity later. When you confront Kagha with the truth, the game offers something rare, an interruption. She can double down, protect her image, lock in the bad ending, or she can stop. If Kagha turns away from the Shadow Druids, it's not because she suddenly becomes fearless. It's because she becomes interruptible. That's the moment every organization needs and many never get. So here's the fifth takeaway. Choose someone who can interrupt you before fear hardens into policy. Give them permission to ask one question. Is fear driving this? If no one can ask you that, you are one crisis away from becoming unaccountable. And here's the hopeful part about Baldur's Gate 3. It rewards leaders who stay curious long enough to choose differently. Good leaders aren't ones that never fail checks. They're ones who leave space in the dialogue tree for interruption, for humility, for growth. Kagha is dangerous not because she feels fear, but because fear makes her feel certain. And certainty without humility is how leaders harm people while calling it responsibility. And just to recap really quickly, here's your takeaways. Ask, what do I not understand yet before I punish? When you think you have no choice, look for the third option. Make sure someone is allowed to challenge you, not just agree. Name who will pay the cost for your decision. Give one trusted person permission to ask, is fear driving this? Those aren't abstract leadership principles. They're actual, tangible survival mechanics. Baldur's Gate 3 does an excellent job of reminding us of something important. Fear can be in the party. Fear can even speak, but fear does not make the final roll. Thank you so much for stopping by the Guiding Lantern Adventurers. We'll see you next time.